pretty broad range of experience. I've worked as a transportation planner, I've worked in land use, urban design. Two places in North Carolina I've previously worked were the city of Charlotte, little town down in the Piedmont, and the city of Concord, which is a mid-sized city just northeast of Charlotte. So, yeah.
Well, we're glad you're here. It looks like you have tons of experience in your resume. So we want you to go back and review all of the changes that we made.
I've already started looking.
Well, we had a long process. Any thoughts you might have would be great.
Sure.
And as you know, the town council is working through that now.
Mm-hmm.
We're glad you're here. Anybody have any questions of Scott?
Thank you.
Is there a motion to approve the agenda as circulated? Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. It passes. The minutes of the November 5th meeting were attached to the agenda when it was circulated, and I hope you all have had a chance to read it. Is there a motion to approve those minutes as they were circulated? Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. I thought I'd tell you that I went to the council meeting last week, and it was very pleasant. They were very grateful for all of our service. I told them that they were going to have to spend as much time on it as we did. But they were very appreciative of the work. I thought and that'll show up in their minutes, but I want y'all to know how much they were grateful for what y'all have done. Tom Widmer, I just received this from him, and I've sent it to Alex to include in the minutes, but Tom asked me if I would read this to y'all. Friends, the town council received your final recommendations on the zoning ordinance changes last week at our November meeting. It was clear to all of us what an impressive and dedicated group of people you are who spent untold hours reviewing the ordinances and making recommendations. That you would expend such time and energy on behalf of all of us in Montreat is humbling. Thank you for all your efforts, and I can only hope that we can do justice in our actions to all the work that you invested. And thank you for your work in making Montreat a better place to live, work, and play. We're blessed to have you working on the town's behalf. So thank y'all very much. And with that, I thought I'd just tell you that I did meet with Susan Taylor Rash again, and all of her comments were included within our submittal to the town council, except those related to section 510.58, which are the vested rights. And she's going to work on that and get that to us. I told her she didn't need to have it by today, but our next meeting we can get that, so we won't delay on that. So,
And just for clarification, that was the vested rights?
yes, that's section 510.58.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just,
What it says now is any approved conditional zoning district shall have vested rights. So we had to talk about, well, what did that mean? How long were they vested? How did we go about that? So she said she's going to take a look at the statutes and try to coordinate that.
no, I recall that. Thank you. I wasn't sure I heard you correctly. I just wanted to make sure that.
Okay, good. With that, our remaining agenda for the work we started some time ago to take a look at any issues in the stormwater management ordinance, which would affect zoning related issues. And after that, the hillside development steep slope ordinance. So we thought we'd take those first, the stormwater, and secondly, the hillside. So Wade Burns, as you all know, has been particularly interested in both of these. And Wade has agreed to give a presentation. Before that, let me say, Alex and I've talked, and I think I've told each of y'all that the town has got a study of the stormwater system by an independent consultant who was going to try to be here today, but they couldn't be here today, but they will be at our next meeting just to tell us in large scope what they're doing. And I've asked Alex to explain a little bit of that today, just so we have some benefit.
Sure. So we received a grant to do a stormwater study through the Land of Sky, which is our regional council of government. And the Land of Sky has awarded a contract to Blue Earth Engineering, which I believe is out of Madison County. But the scope of the work that they're doing is it's kind of a global look at what the physical situation is for stormwater in Montreat. So what they're doing is they're mapping outflows, they're mapping ditches, culverts, stormwater boxes, and trying to get an idea of where water is flowing in Montreat and where we need more infrastructure or where we need to put some sort of resource towards so that we can adequately address the bigger storms that come through Montreat, like Tropical Storm Alberto, that did so much damage to our infrastructure. So the scope of it is not necessarily to look at the ordinance. They're not looking at the ordinances. They're looking at where stormwater is moving and where it is working and where it is not working, and looking at recommendations for kind of a vertical approach to stormwater management rather than a horizontal approach, meaning a mountain approach rather than a kind of a flatland approach to stormwater management. And so they're looking at recommendations for physical attributes to strengthen our stormwater management system, which is pretty beleaguered at this point. They are, it's a 2-phase grant. Part of what they're looking at is what makes it into the creek. So they're studying the creek ecology as well. They have roped in students from Montreat College to do some of that portion of the work. They've cooperated with town staff and actually mapping out all the resources. And I believe the mapping portion of the project is either complete or nearly complete. And they'll be working towards making recommendations for placement of stormwater features and types of stormwater features and how to best manage a vertical system, which is, believe it or not a area that has a lot of research or design around the country. So we're looking at Montreat being a valley and not a floodplain necessarily, or at least more than just a floodplain. We're looking at how to manage the water as it comes down the mountainside, not just once it's at the bottom. So,
Great, if I can,
you're welcome.
just so I
Could I-
understand, vertical means mountains.
Yes.
That sort of terrain.
Yes, Alex, just a quick question. You said beleaguered, and I don't want to get into too broad a definition, but in what capacity? I mean, this is a community that's been here for many years. Many structures put in place long before some of these stormwater management laws were in place, and presumably grandfathered in by virtue of the fact that some of these homes were built in the early 1900s or earlier. And I guess my question is that part of the problem? Because these things have been here for a long time, and you patch it up and go on and try to put dirt back in. For those who are looking to move here in undeveloped areas, obviously, we're under the guidelines here. But when you say beleaguered, can you quantify or clarify that from just your assessment?
So, not being the grant administrator or the engineer on the project, I won't go into recommendations because I don't have those recommendations. But when I say the system is beleaguered, what I mean by that is that we have all over Montreat consistently, we have water moving downhill. And that water moving downhill is, as the water tables rise and lower, that changes. As we have bigger storms or more frequent storms, those are affecting the systems. And we don't have a stormwater infrastructure that's built to the capacity that we need. So when I say it's beleaguered, what I mean is it's insufficient for what we're seeing currently. And that's just a history of the development of the stormwater system in Montreat, which is not a unified system. So Basically, it's beyond capacity. That's what I mean by beleaguered. And I'm happy to answer any other questions that you might have.
Okay, I appreciate that. And again, I guess part of my question is, I mean, obviously, since so much was already built and had been there for generations, that had never looked at these things, is there going to be a need for us as a community to maybe start implementing some of these even for the older homes with, as long as, I mean, to find some way to incorporate them into that in addition to the newer homes? Because even with the newer homes and development that may go on, they could be compliant. But as you know, theirs goes down to certain routes and paths that the water may flow. Other areas that are not are still going to be the ones jamming up the system and causing problems. If we're 80% built out in this community, many of them with older homes that were, you know, you could call it pre-existing conditions, are we ever going to be able to get there, or are we going to need to legislate that something else needs to be done? So I just throwing that out there now, so that when we get to that, if maybe that question could be raised.
I think we would be premature to decide whether or not there would need to be some sort of retroactive infrastructure requirement. I think we would need to see the results of that study and look at what the options are beyond just that one option. So I'm not sure how to answer that question at this point in time.
Okay, well, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Alan. That also raises the question whether we are a competent group to be looking at the stormwater ordinance, all of it again. So we'll hear more from that consultant in our next meeting. But that begs the question, which Wade is going to talk about some, but y'all remember when Wade made his presentation before, what he was talking about primarily, I went back and looked at my notes, say that it was to change the setback, which was 30 feet from any quote water. That's not the official term, which would mean creeks. And that was pretty much it. And I talked to him yesterday or the day before. And I think he's going to have a little bit larger presentation, but it may fall outside of our competence, and we'll know what the town wants to do when it hears more from this consultant, as opposed to just the quote zoning unquote related things. So I'm eager to hear Wade's presentation, but it may, you know, it may be, and he may disagree with us, but it may be beyond our capability at this point. So with that, yes.
I think that's one thing, there's no comment. Echo what you just said, is I wrote that ordinance, I was a couple of intimidated, I'm not sure what the right word is. I almost felt like I would be Greek. I was so thankful to John, when my health was certain that this
You are from Laurinburg.
Yeah, I just felt it's a daunting task. There's so much technical reference to technical document, so many times taking what is considered, but it's really like how we do it. I started, my approach was to read it like a good stone board, and trying to make it understandable or user-friendly for a layperson to read. I'm not sure there's any way in the world we can get this document in that form. Sure. That being said, I don't know what we do next with it. And I started going through it, I had the design for it, making the minor changes. So
Yeah, let's don't do that.
what does this mean? Yeah, and I finally stopped that.
Yeah.
Very quickly. So, yeah, I agree with you. I see the right line. We're doing it on this money. Maybe it's not. Get into the weeds.
Well, that was my thunder. If you'll help me carry this stuff I got here.
Okay, meeting adjourned.
So,
All right, so we're happy to hear your presentation. With that in mind, we have some limitations.
I will repeat what I was told when I gave the moment for stewardship at the church down the street. I was told to keep it brief by a great many people. I might not have, and I haven't been asked to give that address again. When I put together these books for everybody, I included stormwater and Hillside because as an architect and town planner for now decades, all of this fits under my umbrella of understanding, if my understanding is only that it is a big challenge. We could not have done what we have done here to date had there not been some sidebars where we had some sort of subcommittee ad hoc, but in the open, where some of you would discuss an item like fences or put something together, because you cannot discuss all the nuances as a full body without getting bogged down. And so to move through, committees are very important in that process. And so bear with me as best you can. I'll try to have some sedatives brought in later. Zoning regulations control physical development of property and uses allowed, in a nutshell. This almost always affects the value of the property, and this makes zoning regulations or use of the property regulations serious business. Other than state, federal, and state laws, only town elected officials can pass regulations on our property and restrictions. So as a check in the passing of regulations like this, because it is serious business, it doesn't involve people's money, the Planning Commission is established and appointed to study and review proposed regulations prior to the town voting them into effect. This is generally mandated by statute, I believe, as a safeguard to allow more citizen input and more thorough review of proposed regulations. The stormwater and hillside ordinances limit the development and use of property in Montreat, but were established as general ordinances. So I put this book together for everybody, and then I put 3 pages in the front of it to sort of take you to various sections so you could sort of satellite in on those, and it would affirm that, yes, it's complicated. And for instance, it affects people doing new construction or an addition. And I thought it important just to sort of sum how serious it is. When you do have to have this, you have to have an annual maintenance inspection report. The requirements require an annual inspection, in some cases by a licensed engineer, and the detail of the report can be extensive. You must execute an operation and maintenance agreement that shall be binding on all subsequent owners of the site. Still on that first page, the town has the authority to seek a search warrant to come and look and see how you're doing with it. This section affirms the authority of the town to require a submittal of a performance security or bond with surety, cash escrow, letter of credit, or other pieces before you would get issued a permit. Deed restrictions, deed recordation, and indications on plat. Your site plan and all the requirements of it shall be recorded with the county registrar of deeds upon final plat approval. That's the top of the second page I gave you. And in the second paragraph, it shall be recorded with the county register of deeds so that as to appear in the chain of title on all subsequent purchasers under generally accepted searching principles. I don't know if that'll hurt anybody on a home equity loan application or not. Any failure to comply is unlawful and shall constitute a violation of this ordinance and is subject to the same civil or criminal penalties as other zoning violations. And this last sentence is the one that I've seen several times in Montreat, and each time I think if a subcommittee went in and discussed it, they wouldn't do it. But with each day, if you violate it and you're notified of it, with each day that the violation continues and hadn't been corrected, that constitutes a separate offense. So if you didn't fix it and it cited you, and it's going to take you a month. And if the town ordinance had a $500 penalty for such violation, then you've got 30 days of additional violations at $500 apiece until that contractor you brought in fixed it, and hope it doesn't snow. I make that point merely that it shows the possibility for needing subcommittee study as Dan has affirmed. So then I passed out this piece on the purpose. 55 years ago, I'm in my second year in the College of Architecture, and I won't tell you the story I'd like to because of time. But 2 years prior to that, a senior in high school, a teacher took our class and said, I'm going to teach you something over the next 6 weeks that's going to change your life. And it was logic, symbolic logic, major premise, minor premise, conclusions, and so forth. And it taught me, and I've used it throughout my career, if I see something complicated, try to take the scales off it, scrape the barnacles off and see what it says. So in the 79 words, the 10 words tell us what it is. It's to control the adverse effects of stormwater associated with new development. That lets us know it doesn't apply to an existing person unless they're doing something new. And then underneath, I put the bullet points that you would delve into as you're trying to deal with the real purpose for stormwater control. Rapid runoff, flooding, erosion. From erosion, you get sediment and contaminants. You have damage to town infrastructure, pavement, culverts that clog, water channels that clog. The drawbacks are that this is only for new development and no requirements of existing property owners. They're expensive systems, perpetual maintenance, and few systems. And so I'll just conclude, there's a disproportionate burden here. I've talked to the two officials who are putting together the stormwater package now, and they're dealing with these bullets, and as Alex had outlined and so forth. So we got a serious problem because we've got a lot of volume.
Excuse me, just a quick second. Can I interject? Who are these two individuals, just out of curiosity? And
Marshall and I can't remember the names.
Mary Roberts.
Marion Roberts.
I'm sorry, Mary Broderick is the grant administrator at the Land of Sky, and then the gentleman's name escapes me, but he's the point engineer on the project for the Blue Earth Engineering.
and this is from that other agency, is that correct? That's coming to evaluate. Okay, and one other quick question from some of the handouts that you had given. You mentioned a stormwater administrator. Who's that here
That
in
is
Montreat?
Scott. That is the code administrator.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Welcome aboard, Scott.
So I gave you at the end of that booklet an example of the meeting the requirements of the stormwater ordinance. So these are the last 4 pages in that book I gave you. This is a typical, it's an 80 by 150 foot lot. An 1,860 square foot footprint plus porches and enough drive to turn around and get back out. I told Mason that I had this math professor said, anytime you do a complicated math problem, take a look at the answer before you leave it, because oftentimes the answer just won't make sense. And the answer to our ordinance is heavy, that for this modest house, they must capture and retain for a 48 to 72 hour discharge period 7,340 gallons of water.
Where's that in the ordinance?
That is,
Here's what? The capture requirement. And what does the ordinance say about capture?
well, retain. retained.
We can go on. I can say, I'm not sure. 80 gallon, 50 is typical outside or not. I can say, slightly more than a lot. A footprint somewhat smaller than this, but, and when I was on the hillside of it, I was able to comply with the stormwater requirements. I had spent the money, I had built the system, and I didn't like spending the money. But I understood I have to, did, and it just didn't seem to me that it required me to retain anywhere near this amount of water. I understand if it was a commercial, I was able to read in here that there was retention requirements for commercial properties, but I just didn't see it, so we need to look at that. And I just bring that to your attention. I just didn't see where there was, we got to that number. What was there on this?
Well, I've got a lot of problems being 75 years old. One of them I can be wrong about half the time. But I've read this ordinance a great many times. And when you see the Sweetenburg exhibit, you know, they only added 1,000 square feet of on a flat lot. And it was $30,000 worth of work. On your house, you've made compromises that, you know, we're trying to sell our house and build another one smaller. And one of the things that we would have to do that we couldn't do on your property, Mason, is we have to be able to park and walk straight in without steps. You know, Susie has MS, she does well with it, and then I'm old. And so we have to do that. Also, when I delivered the package to your house, you have to meet your parking requirement just with a single lane driveway. And so you have been very responsible in making the smallest footprint and impact on the environment possible. But there are compromises. You'll have to go up those 6 or so steps with groceries, and you'll have to, maybe you and your wife just take the car that's close to the road, or sometimes you switch them. But if you try to use, and because you're on a hill, then it was going to cost you a lot more money to go further up the lot, further up the into the lot. And so there were a lot of things working on yours. I am as confident as a married man can be that I might be right on my numbers, though.
Okay.
So let me move.
Just don't see it in the ordinance. As I read through it, I was looking for it. Let me just look here. Go on, I'll get back to it. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just could not find that in the ordinance. Go ahead, please.
May I ask one quick question that sort of parallels with this, but also going into your diagram? There was in this booklet here, I'm not even sure how the chapters are written out, but this is basically all development, qualifying redevelopment projects which cumulatively disturb at least 10,000 square feet, or which are part of a larger plan, shall implement stormwater control. Now, when it talks about that, is that the footprint of the home, or is that also driveway? And
Impervious. It's the footprint of, it's the total impervious surface. And so that's one of 3 thresholds.
Okay, because I thought that did come into play.
Yeah,
Now,
if
you're able to put a driveway in that is like gravel and allows porous, distribution, and doesn't take you over the 10,000 square foot.
well, 10,000 is the other 2, I think, are, if it's more than a certain percentage of the lot has impervious surface and so forth. The gravel driveway is considered impervious, you would need to sort of have a washed stone. You can't manage that on a slope.
Okay.
But what you usually use for a driveway becomes compacted. And in our ordinance, it states that that's considered impervious and not pervious. So it works against you.
Okay.
Let me see if I can answer it, Mason. I've looked for two in this way. On page 168 of the booklet, talking about section 4B, it says smaller projects, stormwater management plans relating to development of qualifying redevelopment of lots less than 10,000 square feet of disturbed area inside shall meet the minimum permit application requirements of 304.123. 304.123 talks about a plan, natural resources inventory, and then 3 is stormwater management system. But that may be like,
Well, that doesn't go to retention requirement. The retention requirement I'm seeing is at, again, it's 305.5 on page 170 and 171, which deals with projects of 10,000 square feet or greater. And that's where they get into
right.
specific numbers, gallons, and in terms of retention and detention. I just didn't see that in the residential, nor did I experience in my own permitting process. I wasn't required to use these VMPs that's listed, as you mentioned, in 304.4D, and did go to that effort, but I don't require the, again, the requirements are slightly different on the steep slope, so it's not apples to apples. So.
Okay, well, I didn't mean to belabor it. Wait,
So, are you satisfied that less than 10,000 feet, you don't have to meet the retention requirement?
No, I'm not satisfied with that. I'm not disputing you still. I'm just still saying I don't see it in the ordinance where you reach the product that you've got in your example of this house having to retain 7,340 gallons of water. If that was the case, no new house would have been built in Montreat since the implementation of this ordinance. I've seen several go up, so I don't. I mean, what did they do with the log house that was put in? Is there 7,000 gallons on storage somewhere on site that was required? I don't think so.
The things I was listing on here, I haven't seen them. I asked Alex where were the copies of these stormwater, plans that were approved, and he said they're in each individual building permit file. And so I was trying to find out what there was. I know that on my garage, which is 300 and some feet, which I had to get a permit for, I had to do the stormwater plan, and I had to capture over about 1,400 gallons of water, and design a system for slow release of it on that 48, and that was what I was told by our building inspector, Mr.
Right.
Yeah, and I complied and spent that money. We have a situation where the zoning administrator tells us how they've interpreted things, and that's how it's interpreted.
I understand.
What I told you is, I didn't want to be wrong and then be embarrassed because I'm, put a lot of time trying to figure this out.
I just
So,
can't find it in the ordinance, so.
it may fall within, I've got to look at it more carefully, but in 304, it requires the plan and the systems. And that's where I came back to that earlier site about smaller developments. So anyway, why don't we go on? We'll have to, this does get into the overall, it seems to me. Okay, Wade.
So then the examples in the back of the book show that if that's the requirement, you've got to capture a lot more water than makes sense to capture. But that's what I had to do on my garage, and so that I did. But in the booklet that I gave you some weeks ago, on an analysis of September 4th, it had the pictures, I think, of the Sweetenberg stormwater control piece. It's on the cover. But there are more photographs of that. It was an extensive system that had to go 12 feet deep beside the wall and so forth. So, I'll go to the two things. If you put in enough parking and turnaround on your site and enough driveway to get you up to where you could walk and carry groceries, you would have a burden of some sort. Now, how would that be defined? You know, we can find out. As my wife likes to say, just how wrong I am. But anyway, but stormwater is absolutely a problem based on the first sheets I gave. We've done a pretty good job, basically thanks to some citizens and the Mountain Retreat Association, of protecting this valley. Thousands of acres that have been put into conservation, which the environmentalists would call the headwaters, the very important parts of these streams and water supply. And so the piece that I mentioned about the 30-foot stream setback, I mentioned when I brought it up before that there's a conflict of interest because we have that exact situation. This is what I have expressed a good bit of concern about. And that is that the state has regulations on stormwater, and they have regulations on water quality. And one of the higher regulations they have is on high water quality. And that would be like headwaters and so forth. And so they have a regulation in which they request a 30-foot buffer, not setback, but a 30-foot buffer between the top of the bank of a water source and development or building on that site. But recognizing that on smaller lots and so forth, that's a pretty extreme piece. And so the state standard is on lots 1 acre or more. So I sarcastically refer to this as the Great Trail Robbery, because when we were putting all of this in conservation, when Dan and Ellen Dean and I were on what's now called the President's Council, 35 years ago, something like that, a number of us contributed money to some property somewhere over here that Wade Boggs had identified, the late Wade Boggs, that could have been purchased and someone could have done development up toward the East Ridge. And so we put money together and bought that property, and that's been put in conservation and woodlands and so forth. But then there was a section of Graybeard Stream right here that went up right past here and keeps on going. And then over here is the slate over here. And so there was a big push to try and protect those major streams. And so MRA worked with a number of people. Don McDougall was one. Sam Hope was one. To try and acquire all of these lots that had been distributed out of MRA up to 100 years ago, and see if we couldn't get all of this development off of mainstream and off of Little Slady and so forth, and get that into conservation. But there was a problem. This tiny little tick right here, a tiny little green speck right there, that was holdout property. And the owner of that property had sort of an unfinished relationship with the town and so forth, and they were held up. I got an opportunity to purchase that property, and so Susan and I went to meet with Richard Sills at MRA. We have a chance to buy these lots there up on one of the trails. Don't want to do anything that conflicts with MRA. I said, we'd a whole lot rather you have it than who has it now. So we bought it. And so we then swapped that land up here for 2 lots here. And once we did that, everything was complete. And so all of this green went into conservation so that all of this now is protected. And right here, you got a few lots right here, these 3. They're owned by the town, and they're where 3 of our wells are. And then down here, you have 2 lots we own. Well, this one's steep, and I can't do much on it. This is the one where we put the caboose. We could put the caboose there because we didn't hit a trigger amount on the stormwater. And it's up on wheels, but nonetheless. But the setback, the 30-foot setback, runs through the lot. And so the setbacks on our property, sides and front and back, combined with the stormwater setback, is 100% setback.
And Wade, just a quick question, being familiar with your lot and that area, that is not a permanently flowing.
It's an intermittent stream.
Yeah.
It comes out of the ground. This is our lot. So it comes out of the ground right about here, and then it comes down and crosses our lot and goes down through MRA's lots, and then about in here it goes back underground. And then it comes out again and goes through John Richardson's lot, and eventually on down into hitting Graybeard. So what we did, what I did, I guess, some years ago,
So wait, it's 11:15, just to, it should be aware of time.
I had about another hour and a half, what do you think?
You got 15 minutes.
Proportionality. If Let me see, yeah, I need to find this. These are about 80 streams in Montreal. When Louisa Burris built her house, they were financially able to buy more property. And even so, they couldn't put more parking on there than you have, with yours, Mason. And so before her father died, they'd have to move a car for him to come to the house and so forth. This Sweetenberg, what they had to do to put 1,000 feet on their house. I think that's a disproportionate burden. I was advised by a few members of the town council that those of us up here just need to donate our land to the town so it can be conservation. Well, that's a thought, but we can't afford it. I've tried to make contributions where we can. But the thought that we need to forfeit our land, which is outside the town limits, so that some people who live in town limits will feel happier that we didn't build there. It doesn't seem fair. And so when the stormwater ordinance was put in place, they added this setback. There's 29 pages of things you have to do to meet the stormwater. There's only one item that throws that setback in. It's in the 3 pages. I think the second page here. Well, not that I gave you.
It's the specific ordinance that puts the setback in. Chapter K, General Ordinance, Stormwater, Section 305. General standards.
So it's that item 7, number 1. That's the only place. It's 29 pages that is there. And in my 21 years here, twice being chairman of this commission, making presentations at an awful lot of town council meetings, I've seen a lot of things that I didn't consider were equitable or fair. I've seen a lot of things that I did not feel like was the best thought out, which takes us to the opening point that when we're doing things that affect the use of your property, it should go through the planning and zoning. And my understanding was it needed to go through planning and zoning before town would do zoning type regulations. And so the hillside ordinance has a similar piece that that I won't get into now because we wouldn't. But that there were 2 items that stopped you from using your property, or could stop you from using your property. The setbacks in the zoning ordinance itself, 30-foot setback in the stormwater ordinance, and there's some other things in the hillside ordinance. So I have felt for 10, 11 years that surely if we had a fair hearing, the town wouldn't say that if we're going to do what we should do, being responsible, then we need to have a strict ordinance so that this lot can be built upon, so that even though we swap this to being conservation, we also need to give away what we swapped it for. We need to forfeit our contributions, like the scorpion and the frog, you know. So I believe that the part of the ordinance deal with stormwater, that to go to that section, and it should, if they want to say that it should be a 30-foot buffer, it should be the same language and restrictions as state on lots 1 acre or more.
In other words, go to the Buncombe County, which is, I think, what you
Do what?
In other words, go to the Buncombe County requirement of only over lots of over.
Buncombe County, town of Black Mountain went ahead and did it on small lots too. That's what I've told them, and several folks have done it.
But that's not my question. My question is what you're asking for.
This is
to
town of
go
Montreat.
to the-
This is an
Buncombe
ordinance of the
County.
town of Montreat. They set their own water standard at, independent of the size of the lot. The state set the standards on lots 1 acre more.
Does Buncombe County have a standard?
They may, and I think somebody said they got smaller too. But I remember my mother saying something about if Johnny stuck his foot in the fire, you do it too.
Scott, for our next meeting, would you mind checking the state and Buncombe County, the Black Mountain and other areas and see what their requirements are for stormwater setbacks? Yes, sir. That'd be great. That'd be helpful to us.
So here is a letter from the North Carolina Department of Environmental and Natural Services Resources. It's in the piece I gave you September 4th. Stream determination, Burns Property, Montreat, Buncombe County. This is page 24 to find this particular.
It's in the other.
Okay.
Yes, it's on the back page 24 of that.
Okay, so you'll see that at this time, since you plan to construct a single-family dwelling, and likely your maximum disturbance will be under 1 acre, the state regulations regarding stormwater for HQW, high-quality water, do not apply. However, the DWQ recommends that you comply with the 30-foot vegetative buffer to the maximum extent practical. Please be aware that you will need to comply with any requirements set forth by the town of Montreat and Buncombe County regarding sediment and erosion control and/or stormwater. So this is Montreat's authority. And Montreat came off of the state standard in a way that takes these 4 lots from MRA that contribute heavily to all of this. This is a church institution that they also need to lose their land, and maybe John Richardson needs to lose his, and so forth. It does not seem equitable to me because you look at the breadth of what we're doing as an overall community for our environment, and what we're not doing, and we're just starting with it with this new thing. That 30-foot setback needs to be stricken. That language needs to be changed to the state standards. And
Would that apply throughout, Wade, what you're proposing? So let's say 30 feet, let's say flat screen.
That's applied throughout the town.
Yeah, so that changes for everything, not just those lots up there.
well, we're not. Because we're in the stream. But we've got all sorts of streams that aren't getting in on the side, needing your home. And I want to impose on you for a couple of minutes because I mentioned this was a personal issue. I've talked to the folks that are doing the study, and we seem to be in agreement. I've described when we get sort of into the weeds or something like a little lot like this in a tiny little stream that's occasional and losing a lot. That sometimes it's like we're picking the wings off of flies because the picnic's not going well without stepping far enough back to see there's a dead armadillo under the table. So what I've given you is just a diagram of a solution to take hundreds of tons of sediment and keep them from going right down the stream behind this building. Every time we have a heavy rain, the Rainbow, which is a state road, pours tons and tons of fines, of the fine stuff that comes off the gravel, right into the creek right here. This really shows a 150-foot long trough with graduated baffles that as those rains come many times a year, because used to flood his office all the time, then a front end loader can go in, lift out the baffles and fill up dump trucks with that sediment and take it where it needs to be and do a major contribution towards stopping pollution damage from stormwater there. Then years ago, when the lake was drained, the lake's been drained twice for the removal of the sediment. And so I had a house guest named William Hobbs, one of the top water feature designers at least in the Western world. Does all of Disney, the Olympic Park, and so forth, water features. And he said, this is so simple. You won't have to do this again if you'll merely put in a basin ahead of the waters entering the lake. And so from the little bridge by the barn down to the left bank, behind those buildings where there's a gymnasium on one side and so forth, we could put in something similar, but it'd be different, but similar to what I've given you there, that could catch this sediments that's coming down from all of these places toward the lake. We could catch it. And then between the left bank and the Curry Craft Center, we put a little road that goes down there. Again, they pull out the baffles. It's more complicated because the Corps of Engineers will be involved because it's a stream. They pull out the baffles and have a fish routes to get around it and control the temperature of water and so. But the lake's already filling up. It was really gorgeous after we drained it because the little bridge that says Lake Susan on it was just under water, and that's starting to go over sandbar again. And so there are things that we could do, and I've talked to the folks who are doing the study about both of them, and we're going to get together after the holiday. My point being that I've made an issue out of a personal thing, but I think it's so unfair that I can say I'm also representing a lot of other folks that don't know the harm that's coming their way one day. But I'm not here just to take care of me. This is all I've done for 50 years is community stuff. And I've tried to make contributions to this town with some obstacles. And I think it's important to bring these types of solutions to us. We can't stop the water that's going to come down from these mountains. This 2.66 inches of water, for the examples I may or may not be right or wrong on for the, that sample I gave you. It certainly applies to other pieces. But Dan Cordell said that what Black Mountain has done is they've changed it to a 25-year worst storm in 25 years. Well, when we had the hurricanes, it was the water over the dam was 3 feet high, 30 inches to 3 feet high, 2 weekends in a row, which maybe is only 10, 12, 13 inches of rain each 24 hours. But if you had to capture that much rain, you just can't do it.
So wait, let's wrap this up. I've made a note that I've heard two things that I think are what you're asking. One is the setback reduction to go to the statute or whatever it is. And two, now a detention facility of some sort. Is that, that's what I heard in terms of two requests, which would go to this larger group, it seems to me. Is that, am I mishearing that?
Well, I'm asking for a recommendation planning and zoning that the 30-foot setback be changed to the state standard.
That's what I said.
It's a separate piece.
Right.
But I've worked on this presentation for some weeks and thought about it for the whole year. And when I first passed it out, I said was where you took the 79 words and made it 10. You said that it'd be mighty difficult for us to deal with the stormwater ordinance. Well, it's a lot more difficult for the town council because they don't have the time. And the ordinance that is there now is so full of extra barnacles and scales and so forth. It's hard to understand, and somebody needs to review it. And the Planning and Zoning Commission was set up to do it. And where we have a problem, as you suggested on Hillside, let's get somebody else to come in. Your first suggestion was tell the town to get somebody to come in and work with council on it. I think it's more effective if we need somebody to come in and do it. It is with the Planning and Zoning Commission, because we would take a little bit more time.
I suspect that that's what the town council will do, be appoint a committee to look at it. I don't know that planning and zoning is the right one, but I just wanted to bring it to a head so that we could take up any additional business and adjourn.
Can I say something, please?
Yep. Dan and then Alan.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Dan.
The last thing you said, I think is critically important, is what are we tasked to do? If we're supposed to be reviewing it and making any recommendations, changes, so forth, right now I don't feel qualified to do that, even having read it word for word and all the way documents as well. If we're going to go further, maybe we're not. That's the big question. I think I would like to see stuff you ask Scott to get some other information that would be helpful to us. I mean, I'd like to see how do other towns up here in the mountains deal with this? The small towns like we, did all of them have a very complicated technical document like this? Maybe they do. Maybe they have a much simpler approach. And then I would also like to hear some experts, so to speak, some of these people from state or where NC State referenced in documents. But then if we're not doing it, if it's going to go back to council and they go appoint a ad hoc committee to deal with it somewhere else, then we don't need to go through that.
That's what I think we're in limbo now. I think we want to hear these consultants next time.
But they're just dealing with the actual, as Howard said, Alec, on the ground. They're not dealing with ordinance.
And so it seems to me that our next step, if we want to, is to make a recommendation to the town council about how to, whether that's a separate committee or us, or in that committee, it would seem, I think you're absolutely right, see what other communities are doing.
Well, and so I guess that's the question. If we're supposed to go further, I need a lot more information before I can make any recommendations. I hear Wade on this one point, but even on that one point, I think it'd be better to look at the whole picture before we start cherry picking things to address. But I hear him, and I have some sympathy to where he's coming from. He's very, very patient for the last year or so, waiting until his day in court, so to speak. So I don't want to just turn it away, but at the same time, I think we need direction as to whether we're to take on this challenge of really looking at it, decide is it too complicated, just right, and looking at other documents and from other towns, and maybe some experts come in and talk to us like we did early on with getting the realtors and the contractors when we talk about the zoning ordinance. If we're going to do it, we need to do it right. I feel like and do a very thorough job. I'm not saying it'd be a 2-year project like the other one, but so I guess maybe we do need to throw it back to town council. Say, who are you going to direct to do this test?
I think that's where we're headed,
Okay.
but I don't want to prejudge that.
Good. That's
And I'd
fine.
like to hear the consultants. And I sympathize with Wade also.
Yeah.
But it's a complex, as you started, it is complex.
Oh, it's very, very. I was overwhelmed, as I said earlier.
Al?
Yes. And again, this is sort of more towards Scott, as we've already asked you to go back and look at sort of the state and county and other requirements. I know that, well, just full disclosure, I grew up here, Black Mountain, Montreat area. I purchased some land in Montreat about 1995 and have had lots also up in what's extra judicial territories, that same area that Wade's been talking about. And there have been restrictions. There's been a major initiative towards preservation of a lot of the areas. It's like, okay, we've got ours. You guys, yeah, it would be nice if you donated everything back and just made it all conservation area. But for those of us who have been paying taxes for 25 years, on a piece of property we would like to develop and build on at some point, but we need to kind of understand the rules and the restrictions. I come into this from a standpoint of, hey, what can we and can we not do? We've already looked at septic and other things, which they said couldn't, but the state says we can. That needs to be discussed also. And a variety of issues. And as a representative for the ETJ, I think it's something we need to look at. But beyond that, when I first came back here and sort of started attending the Cottage Owners Association meetings and stuff, one of the first things I heard was, hey, we've got people trying to comply with these wastewater, stormwater runoff criteria. And one of the things that came out is that, not only did Montreat in their move towards preservation of pristine waters and land and everything here, they went overboard sort of on doubling down. You mentioned that, the state's one thing, the county's another. Black Mountain might be doubled on that. Did we double on that too? Or did we triple on that? Just the rule for having an engineer come out and certify that your drainage system meets standardization, that's an annual incurred cost, which could be very expensive. And again, based upon maybe some, runoff from an unusually hard storm, it's like, oh no, you're going to have to go back in and do all this. So thank you for the $500 check, but now you've got another $1,000 to put into, keeping your system up and running. So, I think that's part of what we need to look at too. So not, what is fair to the people who reside in Montreat, those who hope to reside in Montreat, and future development. And so I think these are all things that we need to look at. And I think the point also made about the double jeopardy aspect of both the slope law and the stormwater with regard to setbacks is something that comes into play too. It's like, how far do you go before you prohibit anybody from doing anything with their land? And I say all this not so much for me, because I think my land is some of the least steep land in all of Montreat that's left. Okay, there's not a whole lot that runs 10 degrees or so. Most of it's like 30 plus for development. But again, the same sort of restrictions that are there are going to impact a lot of different people. And I just want to make sure that those of us who have a chance are at least represented and at least involved in the discussion. So that's all I've got to add. Thank you.
Well, I would just like to say that I certainly sympathize with Wayne's situation also, in particular with respect to a 30-foot setback on an intermittent stream. I realize we need to take a look at what other people are doing, and we need more information. But, certainly an intermittent stream, 30-foot on either side of an intermittent stream, seems to be a pretty heavy burden under normal circumstances, unless you're allowed to mitigate. And of course, we don't know all the details there, whether mitigation is possible and how mitigation is possible. But we certainly don't want to be in the business of rendering people's legitimate investment-backed expectations, zero through over-regulation. It's not necessary. So, but we need a lot more information to go.
We do. And that may be where we end up again today, is making that recommendation to council, but not on the ordinance as a whole, but on that specific fairness thing, which I think has been very helpful to come to that.
But at the same time, we need to protect the environment and be aware of damages that can be caused if we under-regulate.
That's for sure. It's a delicate balance.
So Scott, those other areas are probably a little bit more broader about what they do. And if you could, Wade, thank you. It is comprehensive. It's a really awesome. And I came to respect that as an architect, you have to know a lot about this stuff. So my hat's off to you for that. Because I know I'm just a little dirt lawyer. It's way beyond my expertise. So let's talk about our next piece. So thank you for coming and presenting. Let's talk about our next piece. What? Bill, you have anything to say? See you on?
there, Alex?
Bill, can you hear us?
Very good.
Bill, can you hear us?
Yeah.
He was there just a second ago, because I saw him moving.
Can you hear us?
He's moving right now.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
You there?
Yes.
Okay, any comments that you'd like to make?
The only thing I would add is maybe specific communities like Laurel Ridge, et cetera, might have some stormwater criteria that's helpful.
Right, yeah, Scott's going to get those for us. So,
Okay.
okay? Next meeting, what would y'all like to do? You want to meet again in 2 weeks? That should be the Thursday after Thanksgiving week, the next week. It'll be the first week in December, I think.
It's December 3rd. I may have a conflict, but I could meet for a while. I'd have to leave early.
You've got a conflict on the 3rd.
Yeah.
Let's see. So, I'd like to get before the council meeting is what, the 8th, is that right? Would y'all be willing to meet at 9 on the 3rd?
Yeah, I can do that.
You could do that? Can you do that, Dan?
Sure.
So let's set it for 9 o'clock.
You know, just for curiosity, we changed for Thursday one time.
Oh,
We used
yeah.
to meet on Tuesdays.
Sure, okay.
I mean, just an option.
Yep, you want to go to Tuesday?
Doesn't
That's a
matter to
good
me. I
idea.
just throw that out.
Tuesday at 10:30 is fine with me. That's the first? Yes,
Works for me.
I can do either. That works for me too.
that's Peggy's birthday. but-
Oh, no, you don't want to do that.
Uh-oh.
Tuesday at 10:30, so,
That'd
Yes.
be better for me because I've got a doctor's appointment on the 3rd. And I'm not sure if I can meet anytime on
on the 3rd.
the 3rd. Yeah.
Okay,
It would help me
is the
better.
first okay?
First would be good.
Okay. Can you have the consultants geared up for that?
I will check with them, yes.
Okay. Is there any other business?
Yes, a question. As we put these things off until now, my sense is that the hillside's not something you want to talk about.
Not yet.
And we had agreed, I'd thought, that when we got to the point of getting through this, we would look at special zoning, perhaps an R4, for that area.
No, we recommended to the town that they do that.
I'm sorry?
We were going to recommend to the town that they do that. That was in our recommendation.
But we would need to recommend to them what they do.
No, we just recommended that they undertake it, and then we'll see what they want us to do. They may not want to do it. But they can kick it back to us if they want.
Well,
That's already gone.
it was, whereas this is in the general ordinances, but the idea that we were looking at special zoning for that area was all zoning. Because right now, we're prohibited from having a well, we're prohibited from having a septic, we're prohibited from having a driveway on right-of-way that's not a full road, and about 3 others. So no one can do anything on that property, and zoning was a piece of that. So I had thought that we would have a package of recommendations for that area where it had its own boundary, it didn't conflict with anybody else, and was still to be developed. And our house on the market, we're trying to build up there, and so I'm running running out of years, and so I thought there was a sense that. Matter of fact, I recall we said that we were going to recommend to the town that the septic be changed. Okay.
We recommend the town that they consider whether they rezone it. But they need to tell us.
So we'll continue with stormwater next week.
Stormwater next week, and we're going to take them by field stations right after that. So it's between the school. Okay, thank you, Ray.
All right.
Any other business? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
A second.
Second.
A second. You ready to vote? It's non-debatable. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Thank you. Wait, it's cumbersome, I know, but it's just the way we got to do it.
But we did pass on to the city commission a recommendation that they consider rezoning the entire area. But it wasn't something we felt like we would just simply do sua sponte without any direction from the council.
That will be one of the things we discussed when they